Hello, everyone. We are not going to introduce everyone because you have the internet, and probably you already know at least a couple of these people. So we're talking about building collaborative ecosystems, which I don't really know what that means. You probably don't either. So let's figure out how we want to define it. I was thinking, I do have some notes too, but I'm thinking like as you build collaborative ecosystems in an environment like this, one of the things that strikes me when I come to Web3 crypto conferences is I feel like I'm rejoining with my colleagues, like with my coworkers, in a way that was never the case with Web2. And part of that, like there's a people aspect, there's governance, and it's like how these things interact from a human perspective. There's a technology perspective, and then weirdly in our world, and I think of this as sort of like a limiting factor, there's like a liquidity perspective as well. There's money, and for better or worse, these chains make this insular money world sort of thing happen. And so we're also talking about building decentralized collaborative systems, which in my world, when you're trying to do anything decentralized, it means it takes like 10x longer and leads to a shitty product. So thoughts from anyone on just like high-level stuff, and then I might actually ask a reasonable question.
Thanks for getting us started. I'm John from Pointbase. One thing I would like to add to the topic is we talked about humans, we talked about liquidity. One thing that we did not explicitly mention is agents. So as the topic of the year or the month or whatever, I think we should also add how do we build collaborative ecosystems where AI agents are able to seamlessly build, interact, communicate, and transact across multiple networks and across the Web3 and Web2 bridge sequencing.
Yeah, good idea. In fact, in my notes, it literally says people in quotes, so I totally agree with you. I'm not going to prove it to all of you. Any other starting thoughts, something is here?
Maybe building on both of those things, I think there's a very interesting thing that Web3 communities and blockchain technology enables, which is this kind of like community collaboration side of things. And that becomes even more interesting in a world where you have humans and agents interoperating, sharing, building together, augmenting their knowledge bases, upgrading each other. And I think that's something that's maybe a little more native to how we have built technology and communities in this space for a long time.
Good points. One of the interesting things about it is permissionlessness too. Obviously we say that all the time. As I look at like the code aspect of it, one of the things that strikes me as having been really, really poorly done so far in crypto is the whole concept of composability. Now, there was a comment on the last panel, and actually my friends at Index Network originally sort of opened my mind to this because they were talking about composable indexes, and I thought, well, how can you do that? Because you need to have like a shared schema that everyone has to plug into. And they said, no, it's just an LLM, like a prompt that merges these things together. So, maybe my complaints about composability are outdated now, so I sort of, worry about that. But I think that is an aspect, like there's a collaboration thing where agents and humans need to be part of the conversation that leads to composability or does not, right? Any thoughts on composability from a technical perspective?
Yeah, for sure. David from Olas, and I think on the composability piece, like crypto is very like rules, right? Like you force extreme determinism on everything. You create very well-defined interfaces, and the interesting thing with AI coming into the mix is you can break that up. And I think like what I'm still often seeing is like these older approaches, I would say, to structuring information, like in terms of like very like human rules-based knowledge graphs or like interfaces. And the exciting thing with agents is you can break that up. You can have it fuzzier. And that creates like, I think, new opportunities to collaborate because I'm by training economist, like game theorist, and there's a lot of impossibility results once you get into things like preferences and so on. And what's interesting is that at the same time, there's like, sort of good enough results. And I think with agents, we can get there. The other point I want to throw in on your first question was around, in crypto, we care about not your keys, not your coins. In AI, we should care about if I don't have the weights, it's not really my AI. Or if the thing which I consider the AI or the agent making choices on my behalf, if I don't control that fully, then it's not mine. And I think that theme will be very, very big in the years to come, and crypto has a lot to say there.
Yeah, I'd like to take a step back just a little bit. I think one of the largest technology problems when trying to build more collaborative and interconnected ecosystems within Web3 starts actually at the dev tooling side of things. Obviously, all blockchains have slightly different schemas. They work in different ways. You interact with the wallets, and the wallets have different base primitives that are provided to developers to then go build on top of. And that's the layer where we start to break down and we start to get fractionalized. It leads to fractionalized liquidity on dApps that are built on top of the protocols, etc. And so for us to really get past this and be able to build a collaborative and interoperable environment, the dev tooling actually has to get better. And so that's one of the things that we focus on within Coinbase's developer platform is building wallet SDKs that do two things. They abstract the core primitives that you would expect a blockchain to be able to do: sign, transact, trade, bridge, stake in some cases, etc. Past the raw, JSON RPC calls that the network provides. Because a lot of that can be abstracted away from any given blockchain network. And you can start getting developers where they can use the same tools to build on multiple networks. And that's how you're able to get developers that are building in a more collaborative environment. If they're not building with tools that are pigeonholed to one network or environment, then you can start doing things with more powerful composition and more powerful interop that allows the ecosystems that are built on top to feel more native and to feel more collaborative eventually. And so I think the base problem, we have to start at first principles at the bottom and build a strong foundation for the collaboration and interop before we can get to an end user feeling that the experience is seamless.
Yeah, we do have some of those primitives that have become relatively standardized across lower levels of the stack that then can underpin some of those higher level SDKs. Like pretty much every blockchain folks are working with these days is using Liquidity for its networking layer. We now have Blue Sky and a whole ton of different applications that are using content IDs so that you have portable data that you can bring from application to application. It's hard to build new standards and get everyone to agree on a new way of doing things. But we do have some of those wins in our belt in this ecosystem. And I think where we lean into those and we enable people to build higher level stacks that can work uniformly across those base layers. So I'd love to see more people lean into it. I'm excited to see what new specifications and core primitives AI helps us create.
Yeah, I can just add on to your point, Molly. And hey, I'm John. I think what collaborative ecosystems are really vertically integrated. So like what everyone I think has described here has been more about specialization and composability, which then allows different tools to plug into each other's tools. And when you zoom far enough out, that actually does look like decentralized AI, right? Because everyone has their own little specialty that they're focused on. And I think even zoomed all the way in to the agent level, what I've seen or experienced is that really generalized things are less useful to me than really specialized ones. And so as an ecosystem, I think we should all be focused on getting really, really good at very narrow parts of the stack, making them as best they can, and then outsourcing the rest, because vertically integrating and creating something that's like half as good is not really going to get us far. And it also is very anti-collaborative.
And this is a lifelong passion of mine, this idea of like tiny things that do things well, because I grew up as a Linux nerd. But one of the lessons that we learned from Unix is you don't just have tiny things that do things well, but you have a system in which they can communicate, and there's like expected behavior. And this, to your point, Molly, about standards, you need to develop them. I don't think we need to anymore think about developing standards in standards bodies, though. Maybe there's probably some cases where you need to. But here's how you create standards. You have agents creating a bunch of code, and it becomes used, so it becomes de facto, right? So like one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot, code generation, because I'm a developer, is the reason that the LLMs are good at developing code right now is because there's so much code that already works, is already in production, is already documented. And so you're not actually creating code, you're compiling to frameworks and existing libraries. And I wonder, like, maybe in this broader idea, should we just be like really focusing on more of those hardened things, not standards, but just like, this is the code that exists. We can use agents that are really specialized to even create that code. And then all code generation is just targeting this higher and higher level of abstraction. Does this make sense, or am I being dumb?
I think so. I think the one concern I have there is like LLMs perpetuating bad code and like enshrining the wrong way of doing something into like the public, where the public is not educated as much as the AI is to like actually make that decision, right? Like if I outsource the decision for how to build some key cryptography component of my app to an LLM and they use insecure hashing algorithms invented in 2014 because there's just the most written about those, it becomes really dangerous, and then it like perpetuates that issue.
Yeah, so the agent should never generate that. It should target a thing that's already hardened, right? Everyone already knows.
So how do you measure that?
I don't know. Maybe it's crypto, maybe it's a marketplace kind of dynamic or something, survival of the fittest. I think I can say something.
I mean, I think one of the interesting points in this conversation is like smart contracts, well-defined APIs are very deterministic, right? And like they are so because humans and machines have worked on them to make them so. But an agent by definition isn't. Like an agent has agency, and you don't technically know what you can build one maybe where it's fully public, but in most cases it probably has private information, private preferences, and so on. So when you're interacting with the system, there's a certain degree of uncertainty as to how it will respond. Same way we humans are unpredictable. And so I think that will shape a lot how we see the agentic web. It's like you have these kind of systems that are more like API-like, where you get like reliable responses, and then you have agents that might or might not behave in the way you anticipate.
I think that's a great point. I do want to caution that a world in which agents are both useful and we let them operate fully autonomously without any sort of policy engine or controls, I think is a world that's going to end in pretty much in disaster fairly quickly.
Okay.
And so I think 2 points to touch on. One there is, for agents to become useful, we're not going to let them go out and make decisions fully autonomously in the real world. We just say the LLM, the foundational models are not bluntly smart enough today to be able to do that. So we do need to focus on ways to isolate that behavior and curtail the behavior that we don't want. And so building policy engines that interact very seamlessly with AI frameworks, especially on-chain policy engines that are publicly verifiable, so you can trustlessly verify what an agent is capable of doing and what it's not capable of doing as well. Can your agent interact with these 3 smart contracts and it'll never send any money to an OFAC sanctioned address? Those are something that, like, for an agent to become useful, you need to be able to trustlessly verify that those things are happening. The second point, going back to the comments about code generation with LLMs, I think we today have become very excited as developers and as builders and non-developers even, that LLMs are reasonably pretty okay at generating code to the point that you can build apps much more quickly than you could, say, 2 years ago. That's great. We spend a lot of time letting LLMs generate code. I think we spend not very much time or focus on evaluating and reviewing the quality of the code. And so the same aspects and dynamics that you can use to set policy engines for agents interaction in the real world, I would recommend that more research goes into policy engines that control if an agent is writing Python code, what Python packages can it pull from? If an agent is writing code, what frameworks is it allowed to interact with? What design patterns is it allowed to use? Is it allowed to access the public internet? Can it do those things? Right now, all of those decisions are being made by some random person at your company that's using Cursor, that generated the code and is doing a patch look through like they're doing a PR review. For LLM code generation to become successful and mass adopted in a way that's non-trivial, I believe that that is not a human in the loop process. That's something that's gated by a much higher level and automated process of control.
If you are afraid about this, the good news is we're already trusting humans that shouldn't be creating code that already suck, and I would guess are oftentimes far worse than LLMs.
I definitely agree with that.
And we need exactly these things that you were talking about to protect against
The problem solves whoever's writing the code, LLM or human, but now we're just generating more code more quickly, so the problem is more prominent.
And I think with agents, it's maybe hard. You have coding standards across your organization, you have style guides, you have general frameworks you're using, but using agents, you can do that way faster, way more deterministically. You can verify it across your organization. So I think it's a really interesting thing that Recall can even be a very useful toolkit for, is building these AI frameworks of what are the building blocks that agents are going to reuse and double down on, so that we get a little bit less great build your own brand new networking protocol, and then I have to go and review all of that code and hope it isn't, as insecure as something from 20 years ago. So where do I double down on improving and reusing building blocks? And now I can standardize that even more broadly across my organization, across entire ecosystems, where we're putting more energy into improving reusable building blocks, which then also do give us more interoperability, more reusability. That might be a really cool opportunity.
Just a quick one. I think we make all great points, but we're actually using slightly different definitions of agents. So, and that's fine, right? But we have this whole spectrum, from the augmentation copilot all the way to fully autonomous agents. And then within fully autonomous agents, you have, in my view, you have the more product-like agents. So it's it says on the tin what it does, right? It's your personal assistant, and maybe the creator says it won't suddenly go rogue and develop a mind of its own. And then very clearly there's people working, not just a few people, entire labs working on agents that are much more towards beings. They have their own preferences. The whole aim of the game is to make them independent of human input whatsoever. They're actors in our societies, and I think we're in that world. It's not we can say, oh, the system won't have some of those things. It will have all of these.
I think, first of all, that's a really interesting point. I think also to build on some of the stuff that Molly was saying, and also drawing from the highly specialized stuff that I was saying a little bit earlier, I think a lot of the times it's hard to not project our view of how humans code onto how agents code. So I actually don't think that agents will code like humans do at all. For me, in a perfect world, I would assemble a team of, say, 10,000 agents. I would have an agent that is just believable for linked list implementations of that thing, right? And then I have managers that pluck the best agents for each data structure. Then I have other managers that implement between the two, one for the networking stack, right? It doesn't need to be, and this kind of naturally fits, I think, what you're saying about having rules. It's not actually about, to me, I think having rules is really, it adds a friction that is hard to do. So you'll have really irresponsible people. We see this in crypto all the time, right? Early Ethereum people are always really angry at Solana because they feel the way that it was developed was really irresponsible. And that will happen here if we try and put rules on how agents can be used. The irresponsible folks will just break. And so instead, I think what would be better is to have believability scores. So if you're using the linked list agent to go create some other data structure, you're just not going to have the right product. And then you can verify literally through lines of code. And this is kind of a source cred model where you can pull out which lines, you can do a git blame and kind of say this code block was generated by this agent who's actually really believable in that thing. And yeah, so I think that's I feel it's hard to understand what the future will look like, but it may not be humans are just replaced with agents. It's just a completely different paradigm.
I'm very excited for more introspectable agents, and I think this is a super critical thing for all the firm livelihood and success. If your coworker has some sort of built-in malicious tendency, you'd kind of want to know about it, before you start relying on them to build half of your system. And so the more that we can start introspecting into the data that is flowing into agent decision making, and we can start verifying that, we can content address it, we can transfer it between different agents, we can be clear about what agent what data your agents have access to. I've definitely been hearing more and more and more about people feeding super critical private data into personal agents operating in secure enclaves, and I think we're going to need even more introspection into exactly how those agents are processing that data to make sure that it continues to be aligned with our aims as those agent collaborators, operators, owners.
Also, one thing is like, oh yeah, for sure. But I also think that like a lot of people are scared of alignment, but like we've had misaligned AIs in the wild for like many years, right? Like social media and like those algorithms are completely like, I don't know if they'd be called agents, but these are AI algorithms that are literally trained to maximize attention and also like emotional turbulence to like, so this is like the first example. I think it has created a lot of like really bad mental health for like a good portion of the world. People need to like delete these medias, and it's like a serious addiction to kind of like regain sanity and not be kind of like moved by crazy propaganda or like really highly emotionally charged content. So like, yeah, we've already like been experiencing this for quite a while.
Strongly agreed. We have 30 seconds left. Any closing thoughts? Okay. No closing thoughts. Thank you so much. It has been a blast. I'm sorry I made it about code generation. That's what I do.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.